This is Optimal Finance Daily, episode 1547, Reserves, 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 by Chris Odegard of theprolificinvestor.net. And I'm your host and personal finance enthusiast, Diana Merriam. This is the show where I narrate posts from a wide variety of personal finance blogs. We cover so much on this show, from saving to investing to debt reduction and more. Do you have a question you'd like answered here on the show? Go ahead and send it over to finance@oldpodcast.com and you will hear from me soon. Even if your question isn't answered on a Q&A episode, I do my very best to answer every email. And now let's get right to today's post as we optimize your life. Reserves, 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 by Chris Odegard of theprolificinvestor.net. Today's topic is reserves, reserves, reserves. Before I get started, I hope everyone is safe and making the best of this COVID-19 pandemic. I'm here in Washington State, staying pretty close to home and keeping up with the latest science on the virus and its implications, as well as taking care of some long overdue home, car, and motorcycle projects. One of my favorite authors, Robert Kiyosaki, says that we don't learn from our successes. We learn from our mistakes and failures. The negative emotions that result from our mistakes and failures lock them into our memory. All of us can probably think of a difficult time in our personal or business life and remember saying, "I'll never let that happen again." The pain and discomfort associated with mistakes and failures cause us to change the way we do things in the future so that we never have to go through that experience again. It's the old avoidance of pain principle. So here we are in 2020 in the middle of this pandemic, and some of us are probably experiencing negative emotions around areas where we weren't prepared for this. This could be financially or just in the area of having extra food and supplies on hand. I know this pandemic has highlighted some areas that I need to work on to be prepared for the next thing that comes along, whatever it is. Today, I want to focus on reserves, 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 reserves. So what are reserves, or cash reserves anyway? According to Investopedia, cash reserves is money that a company or individual keeps on hand to meet short-term and emergency funding needs. Reserves are held in short-term investments that enable customers to quickly gain access to their money, often in exchange for a lower rate of return. Examples include money market funds and treasury bills. Reserves are sometimes referred to as an emergency or rainy day fund. Most of us have probably heard that we should have 3 to 12 months of cash reserves in the bank, but how many of us actually do? If your monthly bills total $5,000, you should have $15,000 to $60,000 in the bank or some other short-term liquid investment. I know that's a lot of money, but stay tuned. I'm going to give you some ideas in a minute. If you had these types of reserves, you could live for 3 to 12 months without a single source of income. Think about it: pandemic, earthquake, tornado, laid off, fired, etc., etc., etc. Sure, you've got problems, but paying your bills is not one of them. I think it's pretty safe to say that with all the problems brought on by this pandemic, if all of us had 3 to 12 months of cash reserves in the bank, the resulting financial peace of mind would make this whole situation much more bearable. This article isn't meant to beat up on anybody. If you don't have enough reserves, you certainly aren't alone, especially if you're an American. Of the countries where the top savers live, the United States isn't even in the top 10. When this pandemic is behind us, there will be a lot of good things that come out of it in terms of how we run this country from both a personal and business standpoint. And my hope is that having personal and business reserves is one area where we make some changes going forward. Unfortunately, there's no magic formula for accumulating 3 to 12 months of cash reserves. You simply have to make it a priority and save the money. In true prolific investor fashion, I'm going to give you 3 unconventional ideas for building your cash reserves. Number 1, stop contributing to your 401k and IRA. If you don't have 3 to 12 months of cash reserves, you should stop contributing. Yes, give up the tax breaks and the company match until you've hit your reserve goal. Depending on your age, the 401k or IRA money is for your financial needs decades down the road. You need to take care of the unexpected emergency that could happen next week, next month, or next year first. Only then should you start investing for the distant future. Some of you could fund a big portion of your reserves just by pausing your 401k and IRA contributions for 12 months. Number 2, start a family bank. Listen to episode 1482 on how to reduce your household budget by 34.5% with a family bank. Number 3, reduce your tax burden. See my blog post number 20 about how as a W-2 employee, you pay the highest taxes. Even if you're not a W-2 employee, I can almost guarantee you're paying more taxes than you need to. Read Tom Wheelwright's book, Tax-Free Wealth, How to Build Massive Wealth by Permanently Lowering Your Taxes for more information. Interest and taxes are the 2 biggest expenses in most households, so take the money you can save in these 2 areas and start building your cash reserves. You just listened to the post titled Reserves, Reserves, Reserves by Chris Odegard of theprolificinvestor.net. Having cash on hand has so many more benefits than just helping you navigate the unexpected things life throws at you. I like to refer to my cash position as my emergency/opportunity fund because I recognize that life is throwing me opportunities just as much as it's throwing obstacles at me. And having that cash on hand has allowed me to make pivots painlessly. So for example, earlier this year, I quit my job due to an unanticipated situation with my employer. I didn't plan for it, but it was an opportunity that presented itself, and I was able to take on the risks of self-employment because I had and still have a long cash runway. I've heard some personal finance bloggers make the case for not having as much cash on hand because it could be working harder for you if you invested it. And if you really come into a situation where you need cash, you could just sell some investments. The reason why I don't do this is because I think it would cause me to watch my investments much more and stress over volatility. It would be unfortunate to have to sell stocks during a downturn just because I didn't have cash on hand. And regarding Chris's suggestion to stop contributions to retirement to save an emergency fund, I'm not sure you need to choose between one or the other. Why not reduce 401k contributions just to get your employer match and then throw the remainder at building an emergency fund? That will do it for today. Have a great day and start to your weekend. Thank you for listening, and I'll be back here tomorrow where your optimal life awaits.